Welcome back to the Magic Sponge podcast, the Magic Round version of the Magic Sponge podcast, the miracle cure for all your rugby league injury issues. I'm Brien. I'm the guy behind NRL Physio on social media. My co-host James, mate, you've done some serious work this weekend. We spent Magic Round together, which was good. You've trekked back up the Bruce up to Sunshine Coast. But you've still been good enough to come on a Sunday night. We both sound a little bit dusty, probably because we are, but a good weekend, mate. How you feeling?
Yeah, a little bit rough, if I'm being brutally honest, Brian. I think for everyone listening, my voice is probably going to tell the story about how my body is functioning. And like I said last week, it was getting treated like a temple in the lead up, and I gave it a fairly good nudge over the weekend. But a lot of fun, Brian. Met a lot of new people in the SuperCoach space and the footy space that I haven't met before that are great people. Good to catch up with good friends. Good to have some great games of footy on the Saturday. It was a really, really, really enjoyable Suncorp Splendor, as they say, or dad schoolies. I think we've ticked that box off for 2024. We'll have to build up some more brownie points for 2025, Brian, because I've burnt through a few today, being generally quite a useless husband and father on the home front after getting home, unfortunately.
Mate, I got home and yeah, like we got home. I think we checked out at 11, which was very much appreciated. And got home, did about half an hour of good. Like, yep, I've got good energy, helping out. And I just said to Beck, I was like, oh look, I might just go have a lie down. The kids are watching TV, and I slept for like another 2 hours. And I'm like, oh boy, had to make up for that in the afternoon. It hasn't been a good dad performance from me today, or just life really, which I'm sure you're the same.
Yeah, 100%. Well, to my credit, Brian, I actually aimed up and took the kids to the park this afternoon. So I was doing a lot of that and get bossed around there. So I did the good dad stuff there, but it was definitely one of the more enjoyable dad schoolies weekends we've had, Brian. I think every year they sort of get better and better. And it's always just a good time to catch up amongst friends. The atmosphere is always the best at Suncorp. I just live for it. It's the best weekend on the calendar.
Yeah, I
By a
think
mile.
the 7-Eleven near the Transcontinental Hotel, which was just outside our hotel, I think we own shares in that place now after the amount of money we put through that place between the hours of 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. It was it was a good well. But look, I'll reiterate to anybody who's listening, Magic Round is fantastic. It was fantastic again. It's just an awesome, what I like the most. And I think, James, we sort of spoke about this morning when it's just so good just having like those random footy conversations. Like you just see them. I call it, like you call it dad schoolies, because I think it has that vibe. I remember being at schoolies and everyone was just so excited that school was finished. And, you'd just see random strangers on the street, you'd high five them, how good, finished school. Like this is just like everyone just loves footy. And you're just sitting there talking about, like some, old Knights digger came over to us lunchtime on Saturday and was just talking, asked one of the boys, why does your jersey say power? And it says powers. And we had like a 25-minute conversation about why it's power or powers on a Bronco. Like just stuff like that, talking about who should be picked in Origin. Yeah, it's just everyone just loves footy. Everyone just wants to talk about footy, which is fantastic. So if you haven't been, what I'm saying here is if you haven't been and you do like footy, it's in Brisbane for another 3 years, which is a fantastic decision, not biased at all. But yeah, I just think if you can get around it, do get to it because it's a fantastic time. But look, we won't waffle on too much. We probably will later. But guys, as always, shows on YouTube. Please get on over there, subscribe. Give us a review, thumbs up. This is, why you're here. We talk through the injuries. We loop it back to SuperCoach. If you like what you hear, patreon.com/NRL Physio. Get on over there. There's heaps of stuff. As the week goes on, you'll have everything you need to know about the injured players. But otherwise, let's get into the injuries from Magic Round.
I don't know exactly what he's done. I would have thought it was an ankle, but I'm just guessing.
He shouldn't be out for a long period of time. I mean, I'm no doctor. We have to wait for the scans, obviously, but that'd be more positive than negative.
Magic Round injuries to go through, Brian. So we'll start it as we always do with the HIA. So the only one out of this round was Wayde Egan, who had Category 1 signs on the field. I guess there's a few that have been accumulated for Wayde Egan, Brian, there. I guess we just have to keep an eye on whether this might extend for a little bit longer, I think. Is that probably the only other detail to add in with Wayde Egan at this point in time?
Yeah, I think you're right. We usually brush through those pretty quickly and say most of them will be back in that like 2 to 3 week mark. Now the Wars do have the bye in 2 weeks, so you'd be hoping that he'll be back by after the bye. But I wouldn't say it's a guarantee just purely because I haven't had the opportunity to sit down. I haven't had the opportunity to sit down and do much this weekend, but certainly little details like this, I'm hoping to get them over the next couple of days. But yeah, he's certainly had not only plenty of concussions, but he's had a lot of like blows to the face, broken jaws, these kind of things where it wouldn't necessarily have been reported as a concussion. It's reported as a broken jaw or a facial fracture or, something like that. But you could probably assume there was a concussion there as well. So yeah, lots of blows around the head, I think. And a few people have brought it up. Like, I think with a guy like this, I think he probably has to look at his technique a little bit because he keeps copping blows to the head and try and work on that technique to try and reduce his risk of concussion moving forward.
Yeah, nicely summarised there, Brian. We'll move through to the games from the weekend now. So to open up, Magic Round, it was Raiders beat Bulldogs. Viliame Kikau is the only one we've got on the list here with an ankle injury, Brian. Any more details around that?
He came back on. I mean, we at the time we were watching it I was watching it from the third tier, and it looked like one of the worst hip drop tackles I've seen. And I think he did well to come back on as per usual with the syndesmosis injury kind of thing. We can see guys finish the game and then require, it be a high grade injury and require surgery. I'd hope that's not the case with him sort of going off, them assessing it and then him coming back on. A bit of grey area there. The one thing I will say just quickly on the hip drop tackle stuff, like since going back and reviewing it, yes, Papali'i didn't land directly on Kikau's ankle because he kind of landed first on I think it was his own player. His direct contact was to his own player and then pushed it onto Kikau's ankle. But this is I think by the NRL's rules, that's probably why he only got 1 to 2 weeks and that saved him. But it's been my point all along that whole direct contact stuff is just bull dust for me. It's one component of it, but that tackle was one of the most dangerous hip drop style tackles we've seen because he jumped in the air almost and then dropped his whole body weight down. That's dangerous. And we want to be punishing, things on the danger of the act rather than the result of the act. If he broke his ankle or whatever, that shouldn't be the predetermining factor. It should, the overall factor. It should be how dangerous was that technique, because it was shit technique. It was horrible technique, and that should be punished. And I just my little hip drop rant for the week.
Yeah, nicely said, mate. We'll move on to Manly v the Broncos here. So Broncos getting a grindy win there, which was nice for the neutral or the fervent Broncos fans and myself. Out of this game, Matt Lodge with a bicep rupture. He's looking like surgery on that bicep. Tolutau Koula with a shoulder injury. I think that was reported in the presser as an AC joint injury from memory. And then for the Bronx, Ezra Mam with a knee or ankle concern. I didn't get a lot of a sort of good look at that one, Brian, to elaborate on that further. And then the one we'll probably spend a bit of time on is Payne Haas with I guess it's been reported. It was reported as like a toe foot injury at the time on the call, but yeah, quite amazing scenes to see him sort of getting carried off and then all of a sudden back on the sideline, going back on under his own volition a little bit later. So there's been a few varying reports as to what Payne Haas was dealing with at that time. So he's a pretty interesting one. I guess the low-hanging fruit, Brian, is probably Matty Lodge to start, isn't it?
Yeah, so Matt Lodge with the bicep, pretty simple rupture. 12-week recovery, might be a little bit longer being a forward because he'll obviously need to use his biceps quite a bit, making, you'd assume 20 to 30 tackles a game. So yeah, he'll be out for that amount of time. Tolutau Koula battled through an AC joint injury. As we know with ACs in the past, you can get them needled and kind of try and play through them. There is a risk of aggravation. It's less significant for outside backs, but for someone who's and I've certainly, this is one place that I've kind of, I guess, altered my approach to them a little bit, is with those fullbacks, they do tend to get them a bit on those sweeping plays where they sweep around the back. And I think that's how he suffered it in the first place. was that sweeping around the back, the winger shoots in, give the ball off. So it's one of those things I usually go with, forwards are more likely to aggravate it. But I think fullbacks definitely fall into that category of they do perform that sweeping play, quick hands, and then get lit up by the winger quite a bit in a game. And I know Koula, it's one of his best plays from fullback. So it's something moving forward that even if he is named and stuff like that, he could aggravate it quite significantly and need, repeat injections. He could need to come off. His performance could be a bit diminished. So yeah, one to watch for there. Ezra Mam with the knee/ankle, he just kind of, I think saw a lot of people say, like, where was Ezra Mam in the second half? Like, he didn't do much. And this was very early in the second half. He just got a bit of friendly fire from Brendan Priakura, just kind of came through, tried to make a tackle, and then collected Ezra's, like, knees and ankles. And he went down for a bit, was clutching at it, and he just seemed a bit limited for the rest of the half. So I doubt it's anything to worry about, but just worth mentioning, like, for those people who were wondering what happened to Ezra, did he just float out of the game? But I think he was affected by that knee and ankle injury. Now, Payne Haas, the Magic Round miracle, I think it was called. He's pretty much getting carried off the ground. Couldn't put any weight through that foot and that leg. The mechanism didn't look like much. I mean, once again, I'm looking at this for the first time from the third tier. But when it comes to those kind of innocuous foot/ankle injuries, my initial thought was, potentially a foot fracture of some sort, because you can get that load build up over time, and then the bone just breaks, like a fifth metatarsal or a navicular or something like that. But once we got clarification it was a nerve injury, going back and looking at the mechanism, you can see as Payne Haas goes to ground, one of the tacklers, their knee contacts the outer side or the lateral side of his calf or Payne Haas's knee. Now, the interesting part here, and it's good for people to understand this, because I think I've had a lot of questions, and I didn't get too many questions this weekend for obvious reasons, being at Magic Round, but I had a lot of questions of people like, what's going on with Payne Haas? Is he going to be all right moving forward? In through that specific area of the calf, there runs a pretty significant nerve that supplies a lot of electricity or a electrical signal to the lower part of your foot. Now, if you get hit just in the wrong spot, it's almost like momentarily cutting off the signal of that nerve to the lower foot. So we hear a lot about it, and probably the more common symptoms we see is foot drop. So the foot will actually drop, the toes will drop down towards the ground, and you'll see people not be able to kind of push off their feet. It was really interesting, I think, that they said it was more affecting his big toe. That was probably a little bit different to how it usually presents. But if you get hit just in the wrong spot, it kind of shuts down that nerve. But the good news is, and as we saw, it recovers really, really quickly, because, and the example I always use, it's just like hitting your funny bone. Your funny bone in your elbow, everybody thinks it's a funny bone because that's what they call it, but it's actually an exposed nerve, and you hit just that wrong spot, it can make you really, really sore. You grab your arm, you're getting tingles down into your hand, you can't really use your hand all that well, but give it a couple of minutes and all of a sudden you're completely recovered. It's because nerves are really sensitive structures. So they can go from 0 to, 8 to 9 to 10 out of 10 really quickly, but they can also come back to 0 almost just as fast. And so I think moving forward, no real concerns with Payne. He just copped almost a funny bone injury to the knee, and that affected his foot, but he came back out, and moving forward should be fine.
Yeah, it was interesting they reported it as a toe injury to start with, but it didn't really fit him getting carried off the field, Brian, did it? If you think it's like, a turf toe or a, base of first rupture or something like that, it just wouldn't have fitted that, because you don't see people get carried off for, those turf toe top injuries, or sometimes even those smaller ankle fractures you don't often see either. Titans versus Knights was the next one here. You got a feel for the Titans, mate. They put up their best here. Contentious decision.
Robbed.
It was pretty. It was yeah. Probably being diplomatic there, but it was pretty tough to see for the old tits. There was they put in a pretty good shift there, I thought. Out of this game, Jaimin Jolliffe pec rupture, so that's bad news for him and the Titans, who will be missing for an extended period of time with surgery. Also, Bradman Best from the Knights with a hamstring injury. I don't know about grading with this one. think the other one we need to shout out here, Brian, is it was visible from the stands, but Tom Weaver on debut playing 7 with basically half a plaster cast on his arm, only 3 weeks removed from he had a distal radius fracture by the sound of things. The fact he debuted and played through that is one of the more phenomenal things I've ever seen. So I think, firstly, shout out to Tom Weaver. I reckon that's one of the great efforts, not only debuting in a first grade club, but playing with 3 weeks post fracture. That's pretty impressive stuff. Hey.
Oh, crazy. I think when I saw him down on the field and you just saw this, it was like the old Mal Meninga, Petro Sivanasiva, Shane Webke, just had this massive phone book on his mini phone book on his wrist. But yeah, he played really, really well. I was really quite impressed with him. So, and especially for a young player to do that. I mean, before that, they had 2 hookers named in the halves. So they're obviously, really down on troops at the moment. I think we named their first 5 first choice halves were out pretty much, or it was at least 4. So yeah, that's, we know teams are dealing with injuries all over the place, but that was certainly quite significantly, specific to the halves. Jaimin Jolliffe, interesting with the pec. I don't think it's been confirmed that it's a rupture. I had a look at the mechanism before I came on here, and it definitely looked like that typical pec, rupture mechanism. But once again, I won't say it's ruptured until it comes out. But when you see that mechanism, I think, to your point, it's probably, you assume it's a rupture until proven otherwise, because more often than not they end up being ruptures. I know Jolliffe's had a pec in the past. Once again, I haven't had time to go back and see which one it is. Interestingly, I have not tracked since 2017 anyone re-rupturing a pec after getting it surgically repaired. So potentially this might be the first one, or it might be like Tommy Turbo and kind of, the opposite one. Potentially. And then Bradman Best with a hamstring. He was in doubt coming into the week with a hamstring / calf. I think it was a hamstring, and then there was Dane Gagai and Tyson Frizzell, who also had hamstring and calf issues coming into this week. He obviously aggravated it there. The Knights described it as more hamstring awareness than a potential injury, but I mean, I feel like that's just splitting hairs. You've got a guy who had a hamstring issue. He's come in. He's had more. Like Nathan Cleary is a perfect example, right? Like, there's a guy who had what they described as tightness, and then he had to have the next week off and those kind of things. So look, it's still 2.5 weeks, I think, until Origin. So I don't think it's out of the question for him to be available for that side. And I think the way he's playing, he wouldn't look out of place in a Blues jersey, but I think there is some risk to picking him because he's had hamstring pain from last weekend. Then he's had more hamstring issues this weekend. And like Origin would be I assume his first game back unless they name him next week. So it's just, for someone like New South Wales, where they've got the center's probably one of the places, like center and wing is, where they're pretty well stocked. So I think there is some risk in them picking Bradman Best at this stage. I mean, as a Queenslander, mate, obviously won't give New South Wales too many tips, but what would you be doing? Would you still be picking Best, or do you think off that hammy a bit risky?
We're a little bit risky off the hammy, I'd reckon, Brian. And they do have plenty of options there in the centres and the outside back. So, granted, he had game 3 there last year, was his debut game, wasn't he? Played very, very well. So, but new coach oftentimes means their choices. So whether Michael Maguire is loyal to Bradman Best in that sense, it sort of remains to be seen, doesn't it? But they're pretty well stocked in the cupboard there for outside back depth. One to watch. Sharks v Roosters was next one, Brian. This was a really good game of footy, actually, from the bleachers where we watched it. The only one we've got written down here as an injury takeaway was Luke Keary with an eye cut. Little bit of a interesting way of describing it, I guess, the eye cut, isn't it? Because I guess the question is, was he grabbing his head initially? With Luke's history around concussion and things like that, this is probably going to be one that might get a bit interesting as the week rolls on, Brian.
Yeah, I think the eye cut thing, Trent Robertson was pretty adamant in the post-match sort of media that it was just the cut to the eye was the only concern. But I'm exactly like you. Like, I think it was just quite, like not ideal to see him grabbing the top of his head. Like, it made me think of when I sort of saw him grabbing the top of his head but then like it be eye cut. Any NFL fans who are out there who followed the tour to, I'm going to nail this last name, but Tagovailoa, where he had I can't even remember what excuse they used, but he got lit up, grabbed the top of his helmet, stumbled around, and they ended up coming up with some sort of thing. And then, he suffered a concussion 2 weeks later. And then there was all this hullabaloo about, yes, he did end up having 2 concussions in 2 weeks. And I'm not saying it was a concussion, but it just wasn't. I never like seeing players crab the top of their head like that. I would think that he would go straight for, where the cut was on the eye potentially. But obviously the Roosters have assessed him and said that he passed all his HI and those kind of things. So more, I guess what I'm getting at, I'm not accusing anyone of doing anything untoward. It's more like there could be some delayed symptoms pop up potentially here. He might have passed everything so far, but then potentially will something pop up later in the week, considering he did cop a knock to the head. With his history, it's just one to watch.
His versus Cowboys was the next game, Brien. Davvy Moale with a shoulder injury out of this one, and Cole Feldt was a pre-game ankle injury rule out. Do we have much more detail on those two players?
So the Davvy Moale shoulder thing is very, very loose, because I did go back and have a look for, I got heaps of questions on Davvy Moale over the weekend, and no offense to Davvy Moale, but I would almost say, apart from Payne Haas, he was the guy I got the most questions on. So obviously there's some big Davvy Moale fans out there. It was reported as a shoulder injury, and he came off really early and didn't go back on, but I didn't see a major mechanism, and he looked like he was struggling with something for a little bit. So I'm not completely convinced it's a shoulder at this stage, but sorry, I can't provide much more there because there wasn't really a clear mechanism as such. And then Koula Feldt with the ankle, there was nothing really reported on severity there. So we'll just have to wait and see. Braden Burns had a whale of a game though.
Yeah, didn't he play well? Good to see Braden Burns getting a run. He's always had the ability, hasn't he? He's just been snake bit by injury, Brien, over the years. He's had so many big soft tissue injuries to contend with. But good seeing him doing good things up in North Queensland. The Warriors-Panthers was the next one here. Boil over by the Wars. It seems like every year, actually, Brien, they give the Panthers a bit of a game at Magic Round. Like, they haven't got the chocolates the last few years, but they always give them a bit of a run for their money. So I don't know what it is there with the Panthers and the Warriors in dry weather footy, maybe getting some teams giving some concerns there. But Tohu Harris was a broken finger pre-game for the Wars, so he was a rule out pre-game. And then also the centre that made their debut this week, apologies in advance for the pronunciation, but I think it's Leiataua with their ankle injury there as well. I don't have much more to go off apart from that, Brian. Have we heard any more on the ankle injury news there?
Yeah, Leiataua with the ankle, he just suffered it in the first set and seemed to struggle with it for much of the first half. I just thought I'd mention it. He obviously played out the game, but once again, just worth mentioning with these ankle injuries, sometimes they play out the game. They go for some assessment. It might be like a grade 2 syndesmosis that they've played through, and they're more comfortable doing surgery on that. So, just something to watch out for. Tohu Harris with I think it's a broken finger. I haven't gone and checked every report, but certainly what was indicated was a broken finger. Fingers are quite interesting, and they can be 2 to 3 weeks if it's like a minor avulsion fracture or something like that. You get buddy taping, which is where you tape kind of 2 or 3 fingers together, whereas it can be potentially, if there's tendon involvement, there's a lot of tendons in around the finger that can get affected with fractures. Sometimes it can be 6-10 weeks. So it is quite a wide range. I haven't seen anything reported from the Wars as yet, but it more than likely will be after the bye at best case, but then it's just how long after the bye would be the question.
Next one was the Storm versus the Eels here. So big names out of this one, Brian. So Cam Munster with what appears to be a groin injury aggravation, but then also a quick update about Jahrome Hughes with his calf injury, and then also mentioning about Ryan Matterson was a pre-game rule out with illness, I believe. I don't have much more to go off apart from that. Do you want to hit maybe Matto to start off with, and we can take it on with a deep dive into Munster after?
Yeah, so Matto illness, there was no update on what that was, but he's just ruled out. You would assume he'll be back next week. Jahrome Hughes, the quick update was Craig Bellamy said unlikely to be back next week, which also not a surprise. We spoke about his history with calf injuries. They've got the bye the week after. There's just not, they ran up a score today. They're playing really, really well. I know they're short on halves as well because they had their backup half in
Pezzett.
Pezzett, G's ACL. So, they're short on halves as well. They've got Munster to deal with here now. But, there's just no reason to risk it with Hughes. You just leave it to the week after, and then he's got, the bye to kind of get over it. Yeah, Kemi Munster, this was one of those situations where it looked like the pain was quite significant right up there. I know a lot of people said he was feigning it or whatever, but these groin injuries can be super, super painful. Now, if I saw this injury, exactly how it happened, in a player who potentially had never had groin issues before, this was a fresh injury, I'd be pretty confident that there was significant damage there. But it's funny in that, we never like to talk about aggravations on this show, or very rarely. This is one case where having a history of groin issues in Munster, he's dealt with this groin injury that we've spoken about. The Storm have said they weren't really sure scans didn't show up much. He was still getting groin pain all through the preseason. He missed out on weeks early in the season. We said it was going to be a constant ongoing thing he was going to have to deal with. That actually works in his favor here. Because as I said, if this was a fresh player who didn't have any history there, I'd be like, oh yeah, this guy's going to miss 6 to 8 weeks at least. But with Munster, I think it works. It definitely works in his favor that he has that history there, because there could be some scar tissue in there, potentially in one of the tendons. His pubic symphysis could be really inflamed, which is like a joint in around your groin. It could just be a really significant aggravation of that. We've spoken about probably the best examples we have of this is we've spoken about guys like Viliame Kikau, Jackson Hastings. They had pre-existing syndesmosis injuries where they suffered another ankle injury and they looked in significant pain. Like Jackson Hastings was one who, just looked in the worst pain ever, and everyone kind of gave him crap about, putting it on and stuff like that. And he was able to come back the next week, and it just shows you that sometimes these injuries, in terms of pain levels, because I heard the commentary, and this is one area where the commentary, it does frustrate me sometimes. I love it when the comms kind of educate people on injuries, especially from their past, their past experiences. A lot of the commentators have past experiences in that area. But this was one case where I was like, I think I heard one of the comms say because he's in that much pain, he's definitely torn it off the bone. It's either definitely torn off the bone or definitely a really significant groin injury. And I'm like, oh man, it's just not ideal to kind of put it that way, because once again, people hear that and they think, oh yeah, okay. And lo and behold, Cam was walking around the field, getting selfies with everyone. He looked in pretty good spirits. Craig Bellamy said post-match, look, the medical staff, they were quite concerned to start with, but it settled down really, really well. So he's still going to get scans. I would say there's probably going to be some form of strain there, and you'd have to, with only 2.5 weeks until Origin, you'd have to consider him doubtful at this point. But I would be shocked. It's just as likely that he plays Origin as he needs season-ending surgery in my mind at this point in time, because season-ending surgery would be quite extreme. It would be the surgery that he'd need, which would probably be a groin reconstruction or an adductor release or something like that. It'd be, at least 3 months, potentially 4 to 5. So it would put him at long odds of playing later in the season. But that's super, super rare, especially with how he's been managing it so far. And it's often it's something that they can put off till, the postseason and kind of, try and manage it up till then. But this is just a big reason why we said, especially for SuperCoach and fantasy purposes, he's just a no-go at this point in time, despite his upside. Mate, from your perspective, I mean, how I've described the injury there, where a lot of that's sort of my gut feeling as well as to what I've seen. Where's your gut sit at the moment with it? And then how would you approach him? Let's say they rule him out for the next 2 weeks and they say he's going to be back sort of post. So he's out for Origin. He's out for the next couple of weeks. if you're a Munster owner, would you hold?
I definitely wouldn't hold. I think we've got a pretty good example here from only a week ago, Brian, with AJ Brimson, because he, I guess, initially was a fairly innocuous sort of groin-looking injury, but now he's going to be out for an extended period of time. So I think with, to your point about does the level of acute pain strongly correlate with, further damage or more catastrophic injury, like Corey Parker might have mentioned, it's not always going to be the case because I think even AJ Brimson looked, moderately uncomfortable, but he didn't look like he was in a 6 to 8 week injury rule out sort of, I guess, mindset or mode. So it's not one that you can really put a lot of weight into. I think it's just going to be a bit of a wait and see. I think if I was a Munster drafter or if I had him in standard setups, I'd be looking for other options, I'd say, by this point in time. If you do have him in standard setups, he's done pretty well for you with a few big scores over the last few weeks, but I think you can move him sideways to someone who has maybe a bit more bye coverage. He's not going to be a headache over the origin period and things like that. So that would be what I would be doing if I was in that scenario. So apart from that, with Munster, I don't think anything else to update apart from that, Brian. I think we've sort of given the AJ Brimson there as a reasonable example to sort of line up with people that maybe not necessarily all doom and gloom. It might be a bit better. It may well be worse. It's quite hard to
Yeah,
tell when
pain
you've got
doesn't
that
equal
underlying stuff.
damage. Exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
Pain doesn't equal damage in these kind of cases.
Yep. Last game of the round was the Finns getting the W over the West Tigers here, Brian. The only player listed here, Samuela Fainu, with cramp through this game. So he's not going to miss any time with that. I didn't sort of catch up with the last little bit of this game. I was sort of busy doing other stuff, getting life back on track. Any other things you wanted to add from the Finns and Tigers?
Just fins up, mate. Fins up to finish
Yeah.
Magic Round. How good. I mean, I did
Very
buy
good.
Samuela Fainu this week in Supercoach. So that wasn't great to see, just going off with cramp. But yeah, the Finns, the top 4 Finns, mate. They're just, they roll on.
They are. They are, and Hamiso just keeps giving you highlight
Oh.
packages of the weekly. There's something special about him, isn't there? I think just whenever he's on the field, good things happen around him. So that wraps up the Magic Round injuries, Brian, but we need to mention one extra person in this, which I think is a really interesting case study. And she's definitely an elite athlete. She's definitely elite on the TV presentation front, and that's Danica Mason. I think everyone who follows rugby league would know who Danica Mason is. We all have a soft spot for Danica. She's a gun. She's an ultimate pro. But what she posted on the socials the other day, Brian, about her lower back imaging, I think it looked like an MRI result. Pretty interesting sort of case study there that we can talk a bit to, because she had some stuff there that is fairly reasonable pathology, which we don't often get with lower back pain imaging. We don't often get a good explainer of what might be the symptomatic driver. In her situation, very interesting from a physio point of view. Anyway, do you want to take away what you sort of thought when Danica posted that onto the social media pages there?
Mate, I think it shows you that rugby league really breeds people just playing through the pain limit. Like it as much as you might think that's a joke. Like this kind of lower back pain can be super limiting just for like day-to-day life, let alone hopping. And I'm sure there's people out there who are listening who have been through this kind of back pain where it's every move you make, it can really stop you in your tracks. And Danica's someone who, she has to put that in her stride and jump on planes and, present herself for TV and stuff like that, which I know you probably think sounds like I'm kidding, but I'm not. Like to have to do all that kind of stuff, I think, considering, and I'll throw to you because I'll be honest, I can't remember exactly what it was on her scans off the top of my head, but it didn't look ideal from what I remember. And I mean, she's doing well to play through the pain barrier, that's for sure.
Yeah, so I think from memory, she had some. They sort of describe them as, so if you don't listen to the nerd chat, probably just fast forward a few seconds here. But she had some sort of modic end plate changes at a lower lumbar level. So where the end plate is, it sort of sits just sort of above and below the disc. So the disc sort of sits in the middle. The end plate's above and below the vertebral bodies. So with modic changes, it's kind of looks like a different signal on the MRI. It's more commonly like an inflammatory response type thing. And in her situation, it sounds like she was pushing pretty hard in the gym. So Danica was just shifting tin and just loading up the deadlift bar too heavy and just giving herself, some sort of inflammatory changes at a lower lumbar spine. But to her credit, Brien, the fact that she is able to get on and off flights, do the travel, do the hotels, still not miss a beat on the presentation for the Channel 9 coverage. She's done exceptionally well to manage all this, because we see people that have these sort of changes on MRI and they can be really disabled and debilitated by them. So, yeah, I think massive kudos to Danica Mason. She'd make a first grade rugby league player for sure, with the level of toughness there that she's put on display, but an ultimate professional as well. Obviously, that can't be overstated as well.
100%, mate. Very, very impressive. She might make an appearance on the Golden Sponge Awards at the end of the year, I reckon.
Maybe we'll have to dial in to Danica and see if she can maybe do a shout out. She might have a way if she can do a shout out for the Sponge in the future. That's the injury wrap though, Brien. We're going to go on to the Patreon questions, like we mentioned every week. Patreon.com/NRL Physio. This is the weekly snapshot where you can get these questions answered. Not a huge amount to get through this week, Brien. We haven't had too much of an opportunity to get through a lot of these things. But question number 1 is about Reece Walsh and his knee injury. Would you hold him for Supercoach purposes over the Origin period if you were an owner?
Yeah, a bit of mystery there. Obviously, he had been dealing with it all week. He'd been off to the side with the physio and the medical stuff a fair bit earlier in the week, and then just didn't pull up well on the Thursday. They said knee soreness, and the strapping was quite generic that he had around his knee. So, yeah, look, like knee soreness can be anything really. There's so many different things it can be there. Would I hold him over Origin? I sold him from a Supercoach perspective, because my impression is that knee soreness, whatever it may be, whether it's a bursitis, a ligament sprain that he's dealing with, maybe a little bit of cartilage irritation, ITB, friction syndrome, all of the above. There's so many things a knee soreness can be. All of that just puts him at a little bit less likely to back up after Origin on short turnarounds, and that was probably the determining factor in me moving him on, because I think there's some really solid options at fullback. I did go a bit of a risk and brought in Dylan Edwards, hoping that he doesn't get picked for Origin. But even if he does get picked for Origin, I'm just a lot more confident that someone like Edwards is going to back up for the Panthers, even though the Panthers are, a worldy team and probably don't need him to back up. I just think health-wise, I have a lot more confidence in his performance over this next sort of period. I know you have already sold Walsh, but where are you at? I'm not concerned about the knee injury. I think he'll be fine, and it sounds like he'll be fine for Origin and stuff like that. So moving forward, I wouldn't be surprised if he's named for next week and is okay. But yeah, I mean, do you kind of agree with me that you think he's probably a trade to some healthier options at fullback?
Yeah, I do think so. I think there's a lot of options at fullback. You just need to have guys that are fit and firing and throbbing in your fullback positions, no doubt about that. The only caveat there would be that Tristan Sailor has had ankle syndesmosis surgery, so the Broncos may well be short on troops and he might have to play a few more minutes at fullback. But they do have other options that they can turn to there, so I don't think they'll be pushing him hard to back him up. Maybe around Origin 3, if the Broncos, record isn't looking so good by then, it might get to we've got to start winning some games here and get him on the field there. But I think until then, I'd probably just move him on earlier and see what happens at that point in time. So that would be my take on Reece Walsh there, Brien. So question number 2, how was Magic Round? Give us a synopsis. What was the best story from the weekend?
Magic Round was fantastic. It was magical. There's no other way. There's many words to describe it. All the good words. Probably the words escape me at this point in time on a Sunday night after smashing out a big weekend at Magic Round. I think talking to a lot of different people, footy fans, people talking to us about the Sponge, which was great. Even meeting physio students and those kind of people who say the stuff that we do and that the NRL Physio account does kind of helps them with understanding injuries, and that's always really cool to hear. My best story, this is a bit of a funny one. On the first night, I was sitting up in, once again, up in section 70 something, and sat down, just got shuffled around in the group I was in, and sat down next to a wonderful Roosters fan, I think it was. And she probably looked like, mid to late 20s. I guess the message I'm going to send with this story is that anybody who thinks that love is dead should just go to Magic Round, because this girl got to talking with her just about the footy, and she had flown herself up solo just for the weekend to enjoy Magic Round because she just loves footy. And I was like, man, unicorns do exist. I mean, that would be a brave enough thing for a bloke to do at the best times. Like, I was sitting there thinking, like, if I was in my mid-20s, would I just fly up, up to a different state and yeah, just enjoy Magic Round solo? I don't know if I'd have the bravery to do that. And good props to her. And I hope she found. So she wasn't necessarily looking for someone, I don't think. But I'm just like, if there are any guys there who are looking for a rugby league loving girl, she was floating around all weekend somewhere. So yeah, mate, that's probably my best story from the weekend. Is props to whoever that Roosters fan. No doubt she's a big Magic Sponge listener. But yeah, props to her for just flying up and just enjoying the weekend. She obviously knew how good Magic Round was. What about you, mate? I know there's quite a few stories we could tell from the hours of like midnight till 3 a.m. But what's the most family friendly one you can tell from the smorgasbord?
On your story, firstly, Brian, like massive alpha power play, just to fly up and be like, you know what? I love the Roosters. I'm going to watch 3 days of back-to-back rugby league in a place where I probably don't really know anyone or don't have anyone to sort of lean into. I was like, when you told me that, I was like, that is unbelievable scene. So that would have been good. My best stories, the first one occurred at about 3 a.m. outside the front of the Caxton on the Saturday night. I think what happened was with like that AstroTurf little setup, it turned into a game of run it straight. So obviously the AstroTurf sits on top of the road, and boys were just lining up to shot each other. It was really funny because everyone was like belligerent by this point. And to the security guard at the Caxton's credit, they were tapping the ball and passing it off to the bloke running it straight and getting like the G up about it. It was really good. It was far out. It was funny, mate. Like I think there'd be a few people that have it on video, and like a few people were just getting their heads taken off and just bouncing up, hugging it out. It was just a really good rugby league vibe. I was like just sitting in that sort of front bar section of the Caxton with my mates going like, there's no way I'm doing that because I'll end up at the Royal Brisbane Hospital with a serious injury of some description. So I was well away from that. The other shout out I want to give is to my auntie, who's a massive footy fan. So she's someone who lives and breathes the Broncos. She rang me just early this evening, actually, at about 7 p.m. She's had a few under her belt by then. And she was like, oh, I need to find out what size swimmers you wear. And I was like, why? And so she said to my wife on the phone, she's like, oh, because there's a vending machine at the Caco and they do budgie smugglers through the vending machine. So what's your size? And I'll buy you some. And I was like, well, I'm eating 32. So please and thank you if you can get me, either a Bronx set or a Caxton set. So my favorite auntie has come to the party there and got me some merch from Magic Round as well. So that's pretty cool. So I can rep them whenever I get them in the mail, whenever we catch up with her next time at family sort of get together. So that was pretty cool as well. I was like, not half bad getting stuff out of the vending machine, because there was a lot of people in Caxton stuff, and I didn't see the vending machine there. Did you see it in your travels around there, Brian? But there's a lot of people in Caxton merch, so they must have done some pretty good sales over the weekend, I reckon.
Yeah, no, I didn't see any, but yeah, I love it. That's fantastic. A vending machine. There was heaps of merch rolling around all weekend. Props to anyone who wore like, any of the rank merch that was out there. That's one of the best parts of the weekend too.
Yeah, good shout. Last question, Brian. This was actually one of the few dour points that we had to sort of endure on the Saturday night, but was the biggest injury that we sustained over the weekend being Hotel LA shattering our hopes and dreams by shutting the upstairs bar on Saturday night. What's doing there with Hotel LA? I couldn't believe it when I saw it. It was out of action. No one was allowed in or up. I had my hopes and dreams set on it. It didn't eventuate. We had to sort of make an alternative plan, which wasn't as good, but still was fun in the end by meeting a few other people.
Mate, I was filthy. Like you and I went in there, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is the busiest, and like I don't know. Once again, I'm sure the person who owns the Lord Alfred is a listener of ours every week. what are you doing? Like, come on. It's the biggest weekend of the year, and it was shut. I was so devastated. And look, we were downstairs, and it was still good. But yeah, you just like, and the music, to be fair, the music downstairs, I think on that Saturday night was so sick. It was, as we said, dad rock, I think, which was fantastic to kind of get in and around that. But yeah, it just meant like you couldn't, I sound really old here, but it was tough to kind of just talk footy with people because you're kind of, I think that's probably why we sound a bit like we do at the moment, because you're just yelling at people. Whereas it's so good, I think that obviously a part of the night where I want that to be the case, and that's more, I think, that natural progression when you go to the Kikau. It's like I don't really want to talk footy anymore. Like I'm just or just talk rot. Whereas like at that point of the night, straight after the games, I just want to sit up on that balcony at LA, watch everyone stream past. It's the best. That was like such a quintessential part of our Magic Round every year so far. That's been like our little thing that we've done. And then this year it got robbed from us. And I couldn't have been more sad at the time. Thankfully, the Magic and Magic Round perked me up. But yeah, as you said, we still made the most of it and still, had some good chats to people down the bottom, which was good. Mate, let's roll straight through. We won't talk about Magic Round too much more. Let's go to how'd you go in SuperCoach this week, your trade plans. Just hit us with the quick hits and we'll get out of here so we can try and recover.
So this week, not such a good week for me on the scoring front. 1180 as it stands now, Brian. I had the captain on Drinky and the VC on Karaz. So I was really riding Karaz for a second try. And then I think Drinky got one denied at the end as well. So I was a little bit cranky about those two. The trade-ins I made this week was Sam Walker in and Drinkwater in. So not an immediate payoff, but I still think they're good trades. I'm happy to. I would have sort of probably done them again, even if I knew how it sort of played out. Targets this week for me. So I'm going to move on Bradman, Best, and Taylor May for obvious options out of my centre wing spot. The guys I'm looking at, so I don't have Zach Lomax. Isaac Tungo looks like he's going to be a pretty good price. Isako's probably going to start leaking money. Tolutau Koula is an option at centre wing as well. But the other one who I think are sort of under the radar is like a Blaze Talangi and a Nick Meaney. They almost look like centre wing keepers there that I can sort of see as well, especially Talangi. He's looked really impressive for Para. And I think once Mitch Moses comes back, that Para might be actually fairly handy as a squad. So I don't actually have that much aversion to maybe bring a Talangi in because I can move them sideways and not have to shed a whole lot of money to get him in maybe. So that's what I'm looking at is a double upgrade at centre
My only
wing.
concern,
I think,
mate, can I cut in just because I know you love a good coaching bed shit. Will they move him out of fullback when Gutho is due back like round 14? Because I literally went to trade Meaney to Talangi this week. And I was like, I just don't trust BA to make the right call there and put Gutho in the centres and keep Talangi at fullback. What's your read on that? Because that was I literally had that decision this week and I went away from it because I'm just like, I can see BA just throwing Gutho straight back to fullback.
It's such a good question. Yeah. It sounds like they've wanted to move away from Gutho being fullback for a while. And based off, how he looked to start this year, he's going to be coming off knee surgery again. Is that going to be his spot moving forward, or do they invest in Blaze Talangi and sort of take a few licks this year for him to be more established by next year? I don't know. It's such a good question, isn't it? Maybe pretty hard to take it off him, but then we said the same thing about Trey Fuller when Hamiso Tabuai-Fidow came back. When coaches have their guys in their back ready to play, they sort of slot them back in despite what the average punter thinks. So, yeah, I think you're probably on the money, though. I think BA would probably look that way, but the only other options that I've got eyes on is Eli Katoa in second row. He looks the business, and same with Hamoli Olakau'atu. If he doesn't play New South Wales, he is straight into my team. He's an absolute weapon. He's just putting up huge scores with like not a huge amount of attacking stats with it. So as soon as those games happen where he gets big attacking stats, he's just going to churn out massive scores. So that's what my plans are for the weeks upcoming, Brian. I'm pretty well set in terms of the amount of people I've got for round 13. I think I've got 15 scoring players at the present, so I don't need to like target round 13. I just need to sort of figure out who can I get a few more big weeks out of in the lead up to that. So how did you go this week, Brian? Because you had quite a good score, which I'd be on the lower end of things, I reckon, this week, but you'd be probably on the higher ends, I'd imagine.
Yeah, mate, I was pretty happy. 13-28. I think I brought in Edwards for Walsh and captain him just because, and Fainu for Kai Pearce-Paul. I was locked into Walker, Sammy Walker and Marzu all week, but once Walsh went down, it just kind of ruined my vibes because I just wanted to captain Walsh on Friday and just kind of ride that through the weekend. And then when that went, I was like, oh man, and everyone, like every man and his dog was getting drinky. And I'm like, oh, I just want something a bit different. So I just decided to go Edwards, just a bit of a, vibe and captain him. So that kind of went well. And then that meant that I didn't trade out Meaney, which has just worked out perfectly for me. He put up, a good 100 or whatever it was. So I think though that decision just kind of fell in my lap, which is good. This week I'm bringing Dylan Brown in, but I have to decide. So I need your SuperCoach guidance, mate, here because this is the decision. I think like the reason I say this, my second trade is potentially an SJ to Sam Walker, but I'm thinking about holding the second trade, which is controversial because I can just do Dylan Brown in. And I can either do it via SJ, so just because I think Dylan Brown's getting the halfback like this week coming, or through a bit of duels moving around, I can actually go Terrell May. So Terrell May, Fainu goes up to front row, Plath goes from 5'8" to second row, and then I can bring him in. I think Terrell May has peaked, but I just don't know how I feel about SJ moving forward. I'm pretty set for round 13 and round 16. Obviously, Terrell May has the 13 coverage, but I've already got 14 without him for round 13, and that's assuming guys like Nico and Angus Crichton, I think, are going to play Origin. Even if Dylan Edwards plays Origin, I've already got 13. So I'm pretty set, but where would you stand on a like SJ? I don't know. The Wars looked a bit better today. Do I hold out on the SJ trade and try and sort of ride him from round 14 onwards? Terrell May is at probably the peak of his price. Where do you sit on? Who would you sell first out of those two?
Probably Terrell May. I think when you put it on weight, when you look at the price he's at the moment, the Roosters are pretty deep in there through the middle. He has had a few like little attacking stats of late, but then with the minutes that he's getting, he's not going to see that all the time. So I would be more inclined that way. I think they're both good options, though. I don't think you got like a bad option there. It's sort of just a bit of a coin flip squeeze. But I'd probably, if you had gun to my head, would be in the trade Terrell May line of thinking. I'd imagine. And just seeing what you can do around SJ if you can keep him. If he's only going to be a couple of weeks, and if the Warriors play like they did today, and they bring that sort of energy for the rest of the year, like. There's still footy in that team. I just don't. There's just something just a little bit missing that just needs to click. And if you got SJ on the back of that, that could be a really lucrative point of difference to have still, I think.
Yeah, cool. I think I'm wearing my SJ shirt today because the Wars were so good and I want to hold on to SJ and that's the way my heart sits. So I'm probably going to go that way because I think I'm pretty well, like doing well. I think I'm around 2000 ranked or something like that, but I'm still a bazillion points off of anywhere, close to first or whatever. So may as well go with the heart, as we always say, James. But look, guys, that's a wrap. Let's get to bed, try and recover after Magic Round. James, thanks for fronting up. I don't know what I've got to look forward to now. That's my biggest thing. I sort of sat there and I was like, oh man, I think the Magic Round depression when I've got a 7:30 till 7 o'clock day tomorrow at work, that is gonna, by 2-3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, I'm gonna be deep in Magic Round. Just depression a whole year until that. That's our one, go all out weekend every year, mate. Condolences to you. I know you'll probably be in a similar sort of boat. But we will have the Magic Sponge to look forward to next Sunday night, mate. So I think that's what we've got to hold on to.
Yeah, there's going to be a few tough carries tomorrow at work, isn't there? It's going to be some real roll up the sleeves and do some dirty hit ups out of your own end type stuff. So we'll be hopefully a bit better on the health front by next Sunday. I think the immune system's copped an absolute pounding over Saturday night into Sunday morning. So I think we'll front up a bit better and a bit brighter for next Sunday on the Sponge, Brian.
Sounds good, mate. And everyone listening, up the mighty, mighty Redcliffe Dolphins.